You're listening to ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio. This episode is brought to you by Ingenius. Ingenius Connector Enterprise integrates your telephone system into Microsoft Dynamics 365 and CRM for increased phone agent productivity. The solution equips service desks and contact centers with features like screen pop, click-to-dial, automated call logging, and call reports for a comprehensive view of interactions. Enable efficient customer service and intelligent decision-making with Ingenius. We thank Ingenius for sponsoring ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio.
Matthew, it's been a while since we talked about our least favorite item, email.
Yes, it is.
All right, so I thought this would be a good topic to talk about. So, what do you do to make sure that your emails don't negatively impact the people you send them to, or get good responses to them?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question, and I think I've certainly run into this situation before where I have a project or a task that I'm working on and need to take action on it, but there are a group of other stakeholders who really need to be involved in that. And this question of with email and the barrage of email that people are going to see through the day, how can I make progress on this without having to grind to a standstill while waiting on other people? So an example of this is an email that I want to send out to a group for feedback. And what I want from them is, some more information, insight on like a customer response before it goes off to that team. But I want them to kind of sign off or review it, that kind of thing. So one way to send that email is hi team, please send me your feedback by Thursday so I can forward this information off to the customer. And I don't know about you, but if I send that type of email, maybe I'm lucky and I get some sort of response back, but typically it's just kind of crickets. But if I kind of turn that around and say it a slightly different way, I feel like I can get more feedback, or at least keep it from falling to a standstill. So something more like, hi team, here's the information that I'm going to send to the customer. If you have any feedback, please provide it by Thursday before I send it to them. So, a couple of things going on in there. One of them, there's the implication that non-action is either agreement or consent. They haven't called it out to put on the brakes, and also being, very clear about kind of what the ask for them is if they're going to devote any time to that, which is, review and provide feedback. So that's an example for me. I mean, do you do anything like that?
Do you say that is, if I don't hear back from you by next week, by Friday, I'll assume you agree with this?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the way I specifically phrase that will be different based on who the audience is and kind of the level of importance or weight that goes with whatever I'm sending out. I mean, if it's a binding contract for hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'm probably going to be I can't be quite as brazen with that. But for a lot of the little tasky kind of things where I'm working on a team project, or we're just trying to collect feedback and get it out, I'll be pretty bold and just say I'm gonna send this out. If you have feedback, let me know. But the fact that they can see in there, hey, there's action that's going to be happening. That is the key point.
Right.
And it's like, the way I think of it is, what's the default action going to be? My default action is I'm sending this thing out. Unless somebody says something, I'm sending it out. And I put in that outcome that I want that's going to keep things moving along as that default action. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the crux of it.
Right. Yeah, I think so. I actually did that. I forgot about this, but I did that yesterday, where we had a team that's working on something and something that needs to go out to a customer, and I wanted to get their feedback from it. And I said, here's the draft. I need to get this out by the end of the day. I want to get your feedback first. If you don't hear from you, I'll assume it's okay. I think that assumptive kind of thing, works if you as long as you don't do that give people too short of a time window. Like if I emailed you something and said, I need to send this in 5 minutes, and if I don't hear back from you,
No, and that's a great point. And when I'm doing this, I'm certainly taking into consideration what people's schedules might be like, how much runway I'm giving them, because to that very point, if you don't give enough time, you're going to get different feedback from people, which is, oh, this is totally unreasonable, you can't do that, and then you start arguing about the time frame rather than arguing about kind of the getting feedback about the content and what's important there. So no, that's a fantastic point.
Right. And then the other thing is just the word choice you put in there. I got an email from somebody yesterday that had a question in it, but it was kind of like you had to mine for diamonds to find the question because there was so much extra detail, which that detail was helpful, but it really made it like you're entangling a knot to get to what is the real ask. So that's where I think you want to be careful about really economical in your words. And, sometimes what I've done in that case where I've got something that's fairly complicated and I need to put that detail in, I'll put like the summary question up front, like here's what I'm asking for, and then here's detail. Yeah. And maybe summarize the question down below. That way you can see what the question is and have some idea of where you're going. Also, with word choice, there's a couple of tools that I've found. Like Grammarly is one that I think you use as well, which is make sure you have good grammar. And what other tools have you found, or what other approaches do you use? Just make sure you're using the right words.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, with Grammarly, it'll even make suggestions about words, some crutch words and that kind of thing, as well as just kind of the overall. It learns how you write over time, and it can also give you some of those insights into what it is that you do or don't do. If you haven't checked out Grammarly out there before, we aren't sponsored by them, though I wouldn't mind a sponsorship, but it does kind of track how much work it's doing for you over time and kind of the types of mistakes that you might be making and what you're getting better at. So just making things a little bit more readable over time. So I'm a huge proponent of that.
Do you get the Grammarly Insights email?
I do.
So it's interesting because they'll tell you. I've been using it for 47 weeks now, and it tells you how much, how productive you are, how accurate you are, and it will tell you your top mistakes.
Yep.
My top mistakes are missing comma in a compound sentence, comma splice, and missing comma in a series. So apparently I need to work on my commas.
Yeah. I have my top 3 mistakes are the possibly confused preposition, missing comma in compound sentence, and missing comma after introductory phrase.
Well, I got the introductory phrase down. Yeah.
Though I will say, just on a total brag, I have the larger vocabulary than 86% of Grammarly users. So I don't know what that says about me. Maybe I just use too many different words.
Well, I used more unique words than 93% of Grammarly users.
Ooh, very nice.
And I was more accurate than 76%.
Yeah, that may just be a fact of, we're in the tech industry and there's a lot of terms that we'll end up using there that your typical Grammarly non-tech space user isn't going to use.
I want to see what the worst Grammarly user's email looks like. Like you're like the guy who is like no better than anybody else, the guy on the bottom. Yeah, like you are worse than 100% of people out there.
Yeah. So how about any other tools that you use around this kind of thing as you're putting together this type of email?
I think I know I mentioned Boomerang before, my favorite delayed send email tool, and they've recently come out of beta, and they are actually there's a free version, but they got to make money somewhere, so they have a paid version. And since I was a beta tester, I got a very good discount on that, so I actually do pay for it. But if you pay for it, there's this thing called Respondable that will tell you how likely your email is to get a response. It looks at all these different factors like subject length, number of words, number of questions, and reading level. And
Ooh.
Surprisingly, it tells you that the reading grade level is a sign of how complex your writing is. So I think my complexity level has been between 9th and 11th grade. But it says actually you should go for a lower grade level. So supposedly 3rd or 4th grade is the optimal place to be. That means simple, understandable sentences that are short. Simple words, shorter sentences will get you more of a response.
Oh, interesting.
It also looks at how positive and how polite the emails are, and surprisingly, items that are slightly negative get better responses than things that are overly positive in tone.
Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting.
So you shouldn't be Pollyanna and be positive about everything. You should have a little bit of negativity in there.
Little bit of demanding in there as well, huh? No, that's interesting. Is that kind of thing like actually tailoring? Like, is it more informational, or is it you might write something and go back and see how changing this or that impacts what that is? And
yeah, because as you type your email, the little gauges move, so you can see before you send it how you're rating each one, and then an overall score.
Oh, cool. So how about, you'd mentioned kind of doing the summary or short version up at the top of an email with a lot more detail down later. Does that kind of thing seem to have an impact? Have you found anything there? Or
as far as, I don't think that changes the overall score, but
okay.
I found that helps. But the other thing is getting away from email where you can. I found certain people that are extremely busy. If you send them an email, you may not get a response. You may get a response a day or two later. Mm-hmm. And I've got certain people that I have on the don't email, send text list, where I know if I send them a text message, I'll get a response, or if I send them an email, I'll get a delayed response if I need to know something right away. And one thing that's helped with this is kind of ancillary to my move to Android and move away from iMessage. I now can use my Verizon Messenger app, which runs on my computer as well. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm sitting in my mode on my computer working on something and I need to send a message, I don't have to switch gears and go over to my phone. I can just pop up my messaging app and send a text message to somebody. And, more easily enter more information into that text than if I was doing it with my thumbs.
Yeah, that distraction just got closer, though.
That's true.
So on that concept of the email that has some questions in it, or a request that you're making of a team, and kind of sliding the bulk of the content a little further down the page. There's a couple of things I do in that same vein. One of which is I will actually put, if it's a lot of text, I will put it after the signature block, and I do that, and I call out kind of the detail that's below as as like peruse through it for whatever is going to be meaningful for you. But I find that if there's just this huge block of text that is in there before it gets to my email signature block, certainly when those come in, people are like, oh yeah, I saw how long the email was and I just didn't read any of it. It was kind of that initial sort of, this seems like there's too much here. So it's almost like a little, mental hack of whoever is going to be reading it, where, oh, this seems like a reasonably short enough email. Then they read that short piece of content above, they get to the signature block, but oh, by the way, there was some more detail for reference later. And it at least gets them to read that chunk up front without getting overwhelmed by the fact that there's a lot more content there. And if there's any kind of structured content along those lines, I will do a slight variant on that, where I'll actually drop that content into an attachment, and kind of work it that way. I mean, attachments and emails can have their own drawbacks as to whether people look at it, but it does kind of segment it out in people's minds as, oh, this is the backgrounder information, or this is the supporting detail, and you can use things like formatting and, headers and ordered lists, like, bullets and numbers and that kind of thing in a much more effective way, where even if you try to do that same type of thing in email, it really gets lost. An email is not nearly as easy to be able to navigate through content that way. So if it's a lot, I'll create that quick doc and send it along.
If you have multiple bullet points, or your email looks like an outline that's 10 miles long, it's probably better to put that in a different form or set up a call just to walk through it.
Yeah.
Too, I think.
Yeah. So, one other thought on this topic, kind of that the initial concept I was talking about of that default action, and that when you're asking a question in email and trying to get feedback that way. I use that same technique in other types of emails. So, one is, yes, sending an email to a group for feedback, but another is like if I have a project that I'm working on and it's maybe something that I haven't done before, I'm not quite sure how to proceed. I might ping my manager, send her an email and say, hey, need some help here. I'm trying to figure out the best way to proceed, that type of thing. Because we have talked about asking for help on this very podcast before. But trying to frame that in a way where it's not just completely open-ended. It's not going to make me look bad as I'm sending out that email, and show that I'm at least trying with whatever I'm doing. So, said one way would be, I'm working on a project. How would you recommend I proceed? Which is, probably not going to. If I'm a manager getting that email, it's pretty open-ended. It doesn't give me a lot of context to be able to work with, and there's no kind of coaching opportunity. And a lot of good managers that I've worked with before are looking to help, kind of develop me, not just tell me what to do, but help guide me in the right direction. And I know when I've had teams I've managed, that's something that I want to do. I don't just want to tell them, go do this. So a slightly different way to send that same email is, hey, I'm working on this project. Here's how I plan to proceed. Kind of detail out that idea, whether it's kind of a rough sketch or, specific tasks and that kind of thing. And then before I get going on it, do you have any other, suggestions on the plan? Or maybe even include a time on there. Before I get going on this on Thursday, again, driving towards some sort of deadline or time frame. And that way, if I don't hear anything, it's kind of like, yeah, sure, go ahead. If I do hear something, hopefully it's feedback that, yeah, sounds good, or, tweak this or tweak that, or we already have part of this work done. Don't bother reinventing the wheel, whatever that is, but it's much more targeted.
Do you ever use things like voting buttons? It seems like I never see people use voting buttons anymore.
So I have used voting buttons in Outlook. Usually it's been for very unimportant things like, hey, let's get a meeting together. Here are a few different times.
Where do you want to go for lunch?
Yeah. What's going to work the best for everyone? Should we do this on a, over a lunch sometime, or in a, just after work, or, that kind of thing. And, it works for what it is. It gets feedback, but I don't really think to use that. Not for anything meaningful anyway.
And what about the Cortana help or find time services or anything like that? Do you use them?
So I've done the Cortana find a time before. I don't really use it. I like, I don't know. I kind of like the human interaction of coordinating a time. But I'm also one to just kind of throw out a time. I'm pretty good at looking at people's calendars and seeing. Right. Free busy and proposing a time that I think makes sense, and I'd rather just kind of get something out there as that placeholder and adapt from there, rather than kind of counting on the service and then having somebody else go and kind of respond to it. Personal preference at this point, I guess. How about you?
I find the Find Time service helpful when you're scheduling things that includes people inside and outside your organization. Just because I can check my colleagues' calendars, but I can't check your calendar.
Sure, makes sense.
Yeah, especially when the more people you have on it, and the
Yep.
more hassle it becomes to send the email around and get people to respond to it. No, that doesn't work. That works.
100%.
That's helpful. So we've gone from email into scheduling meetings.
Covering a lot of ground here on ProdCast today.
I have a follow up from our topic last episode about the Android versus iPhone, and I already mentioned that the being freed from iMessage lets Windows users send text messages from their computer if their phone company has a Windows app, which Verizon does. The other thing I've found is the core phone features are just a lot better. Some things I really like is, at least on my Pixel, I don't know if all Androids do this, but it tells me who's calling me even if I don't have in my contacts. Like if somebody from a company's calling me, it says what company's calling when they call.
So I have not seen that same feature on mine. So maybe it's Pixel specific, or there's some service that's installed there.
Could be.
Yeah.
And also, I like the way when I dial a number, say I've got to dial into a conference call, it does a better job of recognizing passcodes or meeting numbers.
Yeah.
Where the iPhone will do it if you have it in a certain format, like I think it's 2 commas or something. But it seems to be a little bit smarter, and it gives you more options. Like it pops up when I click the hyperlink for the number, and it says, "This looks like a passcode. Would you like to use this as the meeting code?"
Yep.
And so it's just a deeper functionality. That's one of the things that surprised me that I wasn't aware of, and I found just to be a more productive phone for actually making calls. Which imagine that.
I was going to say.
Your phone.
We're talking about something with a smartphone and actually using it for making a telephone call. Wow.
Exactly. And as far as the apps, I have not found any of my apps that I used regularly on the iPhone that I haven't been able to find in the Play Store other than the core Apple apps. Mm-hmm. So maybe there's 1 or 2 minor ones, but I haven't, or some stupid games or something. But even a lot of the stupid games, and I plugged my iPhone into my Android phone, and it went and downloaded all the apps that I had that were in the Android store.
Beautiful.
It was easy.
Very nice and very productive from the sounds of it.
Yes, it has been.
All right.
Well, Matthew, stay productive.
Absolutely. You too, sir.
This has been ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio with Matthew C. Anderson and Joel Lindstrom. Follow Matthew on Twitter at @MCAnderson or on his blog, connectingthedata.com. Follow Joel Lindstrom on Twitter at Joel Lindstrom. ProdCast and the rest of the CRM Audio Network are available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and anywhere else fine podcasts are available. This podcast is a production of Dynamic Podcasts, LLC.